crisp packet is still there. And,
yeah, well, one day I'm hoping for sponsorship either from Seabrooks or Tunnocks.
I've got the BBC website up because if the draw's not made at 6:30 on the dot, I'm sending a strongly worded letter and sending tweets saying #defund the BBC. Oh, my phone's making noise. That's not good, is it? That'd be an emergency alert or something. Need to,
Did you get an emergency?
I didn't get my emergency
alert.
alert.
No.
So they've obviously decided who's surviving and who isn't.
Absolutely. I was at my mum and dad's and their phones went off and mine didn't, and I felt left out. Apparently it's 3. I'm on 3 mobile. I think people on 3 didn't get it. So yeah, people who were on 3 were dead.
Well, it's been lovely knowing you. I got it, but a minute to 3.
Yeah, it was 2.
Which was weird.
2:59, that's right. Yeah.
So if it was the 4-minute warning,
did that mean I got 5?
You get an extra minute.
Excellent.
Yeah. Welcome to the programme. Nothing's happened, has it? Last week we spent all that time talking about IMG, and then they all voted it through, apart from the people who couldn't be bothered or abstained. So it was all a bit of a waste of time in the end.
Abstentions I don't get. When it's a straightforward, do you accept or not accept a principle, why abstain?
Well, why even abstain because they weren't there? Can you not vote in proxy?
Yes.
I'm actually realise I'm going away on holiday, so I can't vote in the local election, so I'm devastated, but I should have applied for a proxy vote.
Is it too late?
No, it's not too late, but I need to pull my finger out, put an application in, and then in this day and age, do it by paper form and submit it to the town hall. Madness.
My postal vote has arrived this morning because I've got no ID, so I can't go vote in person anymore.
Oh dear. Well, they are trying to eliminate the youth vote. So
yes.
Take that as a compliment.
Because I think they know how the youth are going to vote.
I was up at 4 o'clock to hear Phil on Martin Calder's programme the other day.
Were you?
We should have put his book on the table. We'll do that next
Do you want to go and get it?
No, it's okay.
Got off you.
So the vote's through now. Well, what happens now? What happens? You must know.
Well, I think the...
Oh, wait, you've written a letter to League Express saying that you know what's going to happen.
The question to be asked...
Come back in a minute.
What? The question to be asked is, it's been such a slow process getting this through. I think we know what their agenda is. It's what is next that they're going to propose. Is it going to be the Challenge Cup, or is it going to be the end of loop fixtures, or Magic Weekend? But I think what it's told us is if there's going to be constant referral back to the clubs, it's just going to take such a long time.
I think they've got to just make decisions now, haven't they? I would hope. I think was it a 7-point plan or something, and this was point 1 of 7. As you say, this has taken us 9 months.
Yeah,
we'll get to the end of the 12-year agreement by the time they've covered the other 6 remaining points. So.
And the other thing about it was that this was the bit that they didn't want to spend too much time on, because this was the platform for what they really wanted to do, which was roll out their digital strategy. But
how many times have we gone through 4 different formats of the sport, and it's always the contentious point? When in actual fact, I'm not even sure it's that critical. You know, the marketing of the sport surely is
number one.
And
they're pretty good at that, apparently. The other thing that I found was interesting in the way the vote was reported is it's an end of automatic promotion relegation. It's not the end of promotion relegation. So again, a lot of people got quite hung up about the fact that the game was drastically going to be different, and actually it isn't, because we've already got minimum standards.
Well, we don't have automatic promotion, do we?
No.
Tell that to Hunslet, tell that to Dewsbury.
But even this year, if Batley won the Championship Grand Final, they know that their ground at the moment is not sufficient to go up. So we do have, guardianship against clubs that don't have a minimum standard going up. Well, not a huge amount has changed by getting rid of automatic. Anyway, that was last week's news.
There's really nothing else to add to it.
The one thing to say about that, which again I find sometimes we do kick ourselves in the knee unnecessarily, was clubs voted and then we immediately had press releases coming out saying, I didn't mean to vote that way. And you go, how amateur sometimes do we look?
Yeah, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting to see how that went. Because it was obviously done in private, in secret ballot. But then we had all the clubs then revealing their votes, so we basically knew who'd done what.
But then 2 of them going, I didn't actually mean to vote that way.
Yeah.
This is the spot that brought you that press conference with Tony Adams in front of some vending machines in Doncaster.
I was there.
No, this is a tribute.
That was one of the hottest days of the year. and we were stuck in a room at Doncaster waiting for them to come
What
and
was
sit
that,
in
what was
front
that
of a
about?
vending
What
machine.
was that about then? Because you must have been there for some reason.
Uh,
Was that another pre-IMG?
do you know, I can't even remember.
Could have been a Challenge Cup semi-final or something like that. Doncaster.
It was a meeting about something or other. Was Brian? Oh, was it the end of Brian Barwick's reign? That's his valedictory speech.
Brian Barwick's Black Book of Terror. You're not publishing that, are you?
Phil Cool.
Phil Cole. I was going to do a face now, but I can't. Phil Howard has written to League Express. Is this you?
No, I think there might be a copyright issue here.
Because I know at least when I sent letters in, I used a really, a name no one would have worked out it was me. I mean, you just use your own name here.
What have I allegedly written?
Eddie Hearn, the boxing promoter, just in case we didn't know who he was.
Except he isn't really, is he?
He's just a gob on a stick, isn't he? He recently said that today's rugby league has no stars and he couldn't name a single player. I mean, I can now. Jack O'Neill.
Yes.
He's overtaken Rob Burrow and Kevin Tuffield by actually playing rugby league. Granted, that's not
not
famous.
yet.
No,
Not
but he
yet.
will do soon. It is hardly surprising when the Saints team against Hull KR recently contained only one starter in the pack from their World Club Challenge victory. All the others were out injured, with the exception of one who was suspended. So it's not really their fault they're injured.
No. Well, it is their fault they're suspended, but...
Yeah, this is not sustainable. Super League is staffed by journeymen. Does he mean the competition? In the officers? Well, a comment on that. The stars, by their very nature, get picked first and, as a consequence, injured first. I mean, that never happened in the olden days, like when Neil Fox got injured and missed the Challenge Cup final in 1968. That didn't happen.
He still claims he was fit for that.
I suggest, says Philip Howard.
Is it Philip or is it Phil?
Well, it's Phil, actually.
Yeah,
'Cause
so that's definitely not me.
No. I suggest a return to winter with softer grounds, a defensive line of 5 metres to reduce the force in contact, and a reduction of substitutes to stop fresh players smashing into timing ones. And then, like the Keithley thing, he's thrown all this other stuff in, but then something good. Finally, it will be useful to have a decent publicity department. Fair enough.
Although the reducing the 10 metres is an interesting one, because that's...
The kick-off thing.
Yeah, because there's some new trial laws coming in this year for the academy.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Only for a month, I think. Just so they can do the research. But one of them is this idea that we kick off from the 40-metre line to stop those collisions. That's going to be interesting.
Interesting to see.
Especially if you do it at Odsal.
Well, yeah.
They're kicking it onto the main road.
And it'd be interesting to see whether teams kick short more because they're 10 metres further downfield. I don't know.
Ron Smith's going to kick them long just to line people up.
But that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people's comments about what about kick return? You get a big run on a kick return. What about goal line dropout? What's the difference? Goal line dropouts tend to go 50 metres. Should we not do them from 10 metres out? So, look, it's a study, isn't it? And I think it's about the research and what findings they get out of it. It may not necessarily be what ends up being introduced.
Tackling technique's going to be interesting.
Yeah, because for those who don't know, it's initial contact, armpit level and below, which sounds more sensible than the rugby union suggestion of waist and below.
Which was immediately rescinded.
Yeah. So on the face of it, it sounds reasonable, and it talks about initial contact. So it doesn't suggest that you would necessarily be penalised for any contact above the
I assume as long as you don't get to that. So if you start at armpit,
head and neck,
get up to shoulder,
head and neck is a penalty, or should be a penalty in any event. So if you get to shoulder level,
you should be
right. You shouldn't be penalised, providing that wasn't the initial contact. And a small margin for error, and obviously it will make life difficult for referees. I would imagine very difficult. But players, I think they've got a 6-week lead-in time to those trial laws coming in, so they've got time to practice. And I don't know what the referees department will do, whether they'll get some referees to go in to some of the academy teams or not and train with them. That would be probably a good idea for the referees to sort of watch them and observe them and almost sort of simulate refereeing those tackling drills, because that is quite a big change.
I think what's great is that we've come up with a potential trial that the Aussies didn't think of first, the 40-metre line.
Yes.
Well, they've moved the kick-off in the NFL in recent years. I think it's further back than it used to be. Or is it further forward than it used to be? I can't remember. But they have changed it recently. So there's some kind of precedent for that. But it's interesting. And as you say, how does it work on pitches which are not full size? And, not
it's merely to stop high-impact collision at point of kick-off, isn't it? To give you less space to work in. So
yeah, but it's an interesting point just on those teams at Castleford, where you have a full 10 metres from halfway to 40, and then you have about 5 metres to the next line. So the kick-off law is that the ball has to travel 10 metres. So how does the referee judge whether it travelled 10 metres?
Another line on the pitch.
You have to have another line, which is 10 metres from the 40-metre line. So
this is great for Rob studying.
Yeah.
More lines.
Yeah. But these are sort of small things. It is just a small study for a short period of time, and it's Professor Ben Jones is leading on that project.
And it makes sense because, again, we're in that area of litigation, and we need to be seen to be doing as much as we can to mitigate potential injury. So we're doing something.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how, what the research tells us.
And it's not a trial that's been done at first team level, which
No.
again, which Rugby Union were looking at. It's a short period on a sort of a lower level, which is almost in effect non-competitive.
At a time as well where physical growth is going to mean that those collisions are quite high impact. It's not, with the great respect to the community game, it's being done in a professional environment.
Yeah, and so the sport hasn't seen the hysteria that Rugby Union has. So in terms of what's being proposed, it seems reasonable, sensible. Like I say, I'm not convinced it would necessarily pan out, and we'll see it at first team level. But who knows?
And have you booked your tickets for Las Vegas?
For the opening round of NRL, I just saw that.
NRL 2024.
Yeah, well,
every year this sort of story comes out. So at the beginning of next year, we're going to have
I've been to Vegas and
double header at Vegas.
I wasn't keen on it, if I'm honest. And we booked a helicopter trip into the canyon, and it was cancelled, believe it or not, because of snow.
No, I don't believe that.
The weather was terrible. We had to buy an umbrella. So I think we went the only time that they've had rain and snow in Vegas. The highlight was going to the Michael Jackson Cirque du Soleil show. So I'd definitely go see that again. But yeah, I wasn't a fan of Vegas.
Is it just Blackpool on every steroid you could possibly
Well,
imagine?
the last time I went to Blackpool, I was in a pram, so that's about 39 years ago.
It hasn't changed.
You never got to go to the summer bash.
Well, no, with the exception of the football stadium
well,
to officiate, but I've never been on the front, and it's a fact I'm quite proud of.
I mean, that is in the worst. That's probably one of the worst. Everything at the front's not too bad. Further you get outside,
you'll
the
be
front,
taking Harris to see the illuminations.
Yeah, we probably will at some point.
But it's the summer bash in York this year, so it's you don't have the excitement of
The Scarborough pub.
Can I just say, I'm interrupting, but I've just noticed that your jumper and my jumper is distinctive.
It's very based programme.
Excuse
Not
me.
great for the podcast, but for those watching on YouTube.
Did
I not get the letter?
No, you
I've got my Spain t-shirt on underneath. I could wear that. It's because the other week I was cold, wasn't I? And I foolishly...
That's because we daren't put the heating on it.
No, I can afford. Foolishly powered on, but now...
Whilst we're talking attire, I really need to mention the
We should.
the edition. What was this?
£3,
shop purchase
£3,
today.
yeah.
A cooperative sponsored RFL referee shirt from, I don't know what year that would have been. ISC. Don't know. 2000 and I'm guessing now.
Is that the previous RFL logo, I
9,
suppose,
10.
and the current one? I don't know.
Yeah.
Bring back the 30s.
Nice canary yellow.
Yeah.
You must have loved wearing that.
Yeah.
I was watching the other day when the referee was wearing the pink and blue checked one. That was a interesting choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Possibly the worst we've ever
Which,
had.
of course, wouldn't have clashed with anyone's kit. Which is...
Oh, yes.
Yes, we're going to ask you about that.
Look at that.
Castleford Hull
I used to be on the radio.
Was there a segue there?
Potentially.
How do we get kick clashes at Super League level?
It's unbelievable, really. I mean, what's required in the bylaws, as I understand it, is that the clubs are required to submit their designs for approval to the RFL, and their designs should be contrasting in colour, and it should be preferably a light kit and a dark kit. But how many times do we see clubs with two dark kits and kits that are, and then so from there, once they're approved, the RFL then produces a spreadsheet with all the fixtures and then whether they're wearing their principal kit or their alternative kit. But printed on a piece of paper, colours can look different in reality. So that's sometimes where it goes wrong. And I suppose the other times it may be just human error. But when I was involved at a game, I think at Halifax, when Huddersfield were playing a game at Halifax, and they ended up having to play in the Halifax kit, even though Halifax weren't playing. We've had that many games where we've had kit clashes. There was one earlier on this year which I didn't think was very good either. So you know,
yes, there were 2 dark kits in it.
Yeah. You know, I guess the days where, you know, clubs phoned each other up and said, what shirt are you wearing?
They only produce 2 shirts a year as opposed to 7.
Well, yeah. You know, obviously it didn't become an issue, did it, on the Friday game at Castleford? But it's such a basic thing which shouldn't happen.
No.
But it's down to clubs by and large that don't want to produce kits that are completely different in tone.
I think Hull have, I can't remember if Hull's away kit is, I won't blame Hull because that means I'm picking on Hull, but there is one team who their away kit is pretty much the same colours as their home kit or whatever. I was watching Cardiff, yes, Cardiff, I thought that might be a problem, but pink versus white and red wasn't.
It was fine. No, it was fine. Enjoyed watching that.
Yeah. I'm sure I've seen a women's game this year. It might have been Wakefield playing someone, and Wakefield wear blue, and the other team wore a different type of blue. And it's a bit. You can kind of understand at a non-professional level that teams might not have more than one kit available, but in Super League when they have 3, 4, how many kits have Leeds got so far? Just 3?
14.
It's not as bad as the NRL yet.
No, I'm joking.
But
the 14th hasn't come out.
No, that'd be Magic Weekend. No, but it is basic things that shouldn't happen that do happen. You know, like everyone's saying, England, France is going to be rubbish now because all the players have pulled, even though we don't know who's pulled out yet, or who's injured, who's going to go in.
There's never been a mid-season international when players haven't pulled out. So, but it's how you sell that. Do you want to sell it as a news story whereby we have found out who won't be playing, which is fair enough, it's a news story, or do you want to say this gives an opportunity to us to look forward to 2025 and it'll actually make it a more competitive game? All the more reason to go. And you're right, when we were chatting about it before, it's not the job of journalists to promote an event, it's the governing body. But I just think sometimes we jump on a bandwagon that is almost going to detract from an event that we're also trying to help build up, because on the one hand we say International Rugby League should be the pinnacle, on the other hand don't bother going because nobody's going to be playing. So it's a difficult one, but I'm quite looking forward to it. I love International Rugby League anyway, but the chance to see some younger new generation of players stake a claim for the World Cup in 3 years' time, I reckon, you know, that's a saleable commodity.
You'd like to think so. I don't think it.
The look on your face that said it all.
I had the opportunity to get a couple of free tickets, and I can't go because I'm going away on holiday. But I'm not sure I would have gone it in any event. But I'm not a good barometer to judge the rugby league public by either. Look, even if it was a full strength England side, it's still a difficult sell.
Yes,
because it doesn't have a set place in the calendar, and there isn't necessarily the jeopardy in terms of the result, or the doubt in terms of the result. Most people would predict that England would beat France, and as I understand it, in any event, I think France are going to have a number of players pull out as well from Catalan and Toulouse. So you're going to end up with probably 2 understrength sides. But as you say, you know, Sean Wayne was sort of suggesting that he's building towards the next World We're 3 years out from that, and as you say, it's a great opportunity for those people who are in that 40-man squad that realistically at this stage probably wouldn't get in that starting 17 to stake a claim. But you know, from a fan's perspective, do you go and spend 20, 25 quid, 30 quid on a ticket? I don't know. And then you travel and take your kids and then, you know, buy your drinks and your burgers.
I still think it's good value. 20 quid for
it's a
2
free
games.
Weekend in terms of Super League. There's no Super League, is there? I don't know if there's is there Championship.
There's one league. We were talking about this before. Why on earth are London Scholars playing Dewsbury at the same time the internationals are? It's the only other game. Like, if you're going to play it, you've got all day Sunday. You can have whatever you want.
I don't think it'll massively affect the crowd. Having said that,
there'll be Dewsbury fans weighing up whether to go to London or Warrington.
Yeah, and but you're right. It shouldn't be taking place, should it?
It shouldn't be taking place at all.
If it's a free weekend, it's a free weekend, and the point about that is that it's to get you know, the fans who would not ordinarily go and pay through a gate or season ticket holder of another club is to go and watch that international. So yeah. It would be great off the back of a World Cup to have a really enticing game, you know. I don't know.
Not in Warrington, which was, I think I said this when it was announced. It's not a no disrespect to Warrington, I've been there. It's a place, but it's not a it's not a destination we don't go to all the time, once or twice.
But this is also the third year running its held fixture, so why not move it round?
Well,
I get that it's a rugby league stadium, so I get a rugby league stadium.
Yeah. And not every football stadium is available. And we're getting to the stage of the football season where it might even be playoffs, and so you don't want to sort of half book somewhere and then find you've got to change it. But yeah, I'm with you. I think there is even a case for saying that if we could find a venue that wasn't a traditional rugby league venue, that wasn't too far away, let's say a Nottingham. If you're going to get 4,000 people at Warrington, you might as well get 4,000 people in Nottingham, and 3,000 of them might never have been to a game.
Well, I suppose you should build off wherever you went in the World Cup, but that was generally the Heartlands.
Well, that's why
Middlesbrough, dare I say it.
Well, no, but, it's interesting you mention Middlesbrough.
You should take England.
I think
Sheffield United.
It might be later this week. It might be next week that hopefully the Tonga games are going to be announced. But again, the interesting thing will be not that we're playing them, because I think that's been heavily rumoured. It's where we're going to play them. Yeah. I think one of those games should be Middlesbrough, because that's where Tonga were based. So there's a little bit of residual. We looked after Tonga when they were here. There is a lot of work in the community there. So some kids who had a great time, supporting them, leading them out.
Yeah, I get.
Plus, it's near enough to the heartland area, the traditional area. I hate the word heartland. So that we could get there and go to somewhere new that perhaps we haven't been. 9,000 people went, which is not a bad crowd.
No, it wasn't a bad crowd. I think the criticism was unfair, actually, because it's a big stadium. I don't know what it holds.
38.
Yeah, and we're never going to fill it, So,
but take it back, because if you're serious about legacy, you don't go somewhere once and then never go there again.
Well, like Bristol in the previous World Cup.
Well, there's your... Well,
exactly. But that was a sellout. I think they got about 9,000 or 10,000 for that. But if you put it in a 9,000 or 10,000 stadium and sell it out, it looks visually much better. So, if you're going to go to the North East, though, Newcastle, for me, has to be the place to go, because we've gone there and we keep going back there, Magic Weekend, etc. But again, that stadium, arguably, is that too big? I think there has to be a game in London.
Yes, 100%.
Why that would be, I'm not sure, but there has to be a game in London.
QPR once, didn't we? An England-New Zealand game.
I think they played Australia and New Zealand there as well, didn't they? Because all the people in Australia and New Zealand who live in London like rugby league. That's the theory.
And live near QPR.
Yeah,
that's the theory.
Where's Brentford? Is that
nice new state? Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, so I think they will take a game to London.
Yes,
and then you would expect the other two to be in the Heartlands. I would have thought one in Lancashire probably and one in Yorkshire. That's the usual format, isn't it?
But not Hull, who don't seem to
well, the internationals, though, the crowds were poor, really, weren't they? So whether you're looking at... Depends what sort of crowds, stadium capacities they go for. You'd expect them to be going for the likes of Elland Road in terms of capacities around that 40,000 mark, I would have thought. But, maybe Manchester City is
being redeveloped.
Yeah, and that would be great, obviously. That's going to be a number of years down the line. But
would you take the grand final there? Would you make them compete?
Well,
we want to take it to Manchester, but is it your stadium or your stadium?
Well, in terms of what's being proposed with the hotel extension, fantastic. The stadium extension, they're looking a little bit like, in terms of the stadium, almost taking a leaf out of Tottenham's book, aren't they? With that big terrace, I think, behind the goals, and then the covered fan zone. And I think it's the covered fan zone that's probably the appealing bit for the grand final. I always thought it was a great venue for the Magic Weekend. I enjoyed it when we went there. The transport links, I think, are much better to get there, I believe, than Old Trafford for people. For me, I'd take it there. The stadium would be slightly less in terms of capacity than the grand final, but they've not been selling the grand final out for the last few years. So, but yeah, I don't know where they'll end up taking it. So in Lancashire, you're looking at somewhere like, I guess, Anfield again, aren't you? Or
which again is the same
when's
problem
the
as
new
Old Trafford.
When's the new Everton stadium up?
Soonish. Where's Sid?
Won't be at the end of this year, though. Still a way off.
The problem with Anfield is it's the same as Old Trafford, isn't it? It's an old stadium that's been built up, and the facilities are not quite as. Yeah. Well, the City is where Andy would take it. He also says Warrington's the best for logistics in the country. So what we could do this week is we should have got Chris Evans to mention it on his breakfast programme, because he gets paid loads of money. Or give an England shirt to Carol Vorderman, because she's always on Instagram. So people would say, "What's that England shirt?" And I go, "Oh, it's Carol Vorderman." And then we're getting the Daily Mail then as well. We could link Jack O'Neill with Carol Vorderman. I don't know.
Home venues. we're about to get the Challenge Cup.
Yeah, I know.
He said checking his phone. It won't be on time.
Maybe Andy also said we should play the Magic Weekend in Benidorm, but I don't know if we can go there or not.
But Hull can't play at home in the Challenge Cup. I mean, I understand why, because they're having a pitch relayed, and if you're a dual sport facility, that's always going to be an issue. But it seems a shame to me that one of our top clubs can't play at home in the Challenge Cup. You can't really ever imagine that happening in too many other sports.
Well, it wouldn't, would it? Well, they don't relay the pitch in the off-season for Rugby League, do they?
No.
And tell the football club to go play elsewhere.
Yeah. Hull City, you've got to go and play in Scunthorpe for a month.
And that's just the reality, that Wigan has it, Huddersfield have it, Hull has it, that they have to play a batch of fixtures during that sort of May to June window, whatever it is, where they've got to play away. So potentially it is embarrassing, isn't it? If, like you say, if Hull draw Hull KR,
and they've got to play.
Do they concede home advantage?
They've got to play it at York.
Or Doncaster or somewhere like that. They'd probably end up, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe they could adjust the balls on that.
You're not hinting at the hot ball, cold ball again.
Oh no, I didn't say that, did I? I didn't say that.
Is this where we get Scully and Alex Murphy on the
We need to disprove the theory now, and then Hull FC needs to be drawn out at home.
I mean, I'm all for chaos, so it would be quite funny if they were drawn at home and then we had to have some kind of chaos, but maybe they could have played London Scholars Dewsbury Rams as the precursor of England and France.
Possibly, Hull could play their Challenge Cup tie before a London Scholars game.
So I'm waiting for the news to start.
So when's the 1895 draw done? Is that
June, apparently?
Oh, June, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
What happens if, someone flukes the way into the final?
Of the Challenge Cup?
Yeah. No, we won't bother playing that. We'll play the 1895 final instead.
What a potential great day out for the four teams left. We sort of mentioned it last week, but it's a huge opportunity for clubs like York and London and Batley. Astonishing. Yeah,
and Halifax obviously put in a good performance from what I understand at the weekend, because they've had an up and down start to the year, really, I would say, looking at some of their results. But from what I hear, they put in a pretty faultless, certainly first half performance against Bradford.
Well, you were saying it was a tough watch.
We need to put a bid in for that Jouffre fellow at Wakefield. Get him, didn't it? He was good.
Well, hopefully he'll be playing for France. Yeah,
I was saying to Phil when I was downstairs, I turned on and watched 5 minutes of the Halifax game, and I turned it off. I couldn't watch anymore because the footage I thought was terrible. Unlike the Sportsman the day after, where it seemed to be much better production.
I don't want to preempt anything I've written, and I've written not a lot this month. It's not as good. Last month's column, best I've ever done. This month, well, I like the boats line. That's just what
I see. Right.
Okay. Someone point out another thing that I wrote, but I didn't write that, so I'm not hard to tell them. But it did feel at one point where if you were at Halifax on Saturday and you weren't shown on the screen as they cut away to the crowd again, that you must have been in the toilet or something, or too ugly to be shown on the iPlayer. And I've not written that yet. I should write that. But the amount of cutaways to the crowd, it was just.
It also felt like the commentators weren't at.
I assume they weren't there, but
it felt like they weren't there because there just didn't seem an atmosphere. And I appreciate there probably weren't many fans there either, but it was filmed on the side where there are no fans, so you don't get that crowd noise. Like I say, it's probably unfair for me to comment. You watched more of it than I did.
I'll see these people and they might have a go at me. Not that they're going to employ me anyway.
No, but was it a one-camera production?
Well, no, they cut away. There was one try. I think it was the guy who scored his 100th try, but it was right in the corner, so you couldn't see it because the camera didn't reach that. Which is not the camera issue; that's a stadium issue. But it didn't appear. You must be able to do games at Halifax. I'm assuming that Viaplay have done them, but it just didn't look right for some reason.
And yet Sunday's games.
Yeah,
including the women's game between Cardiff and Wigan. Great production.
But this is maybe something where IMG come in and say you have to have proper camera positions where you can see the whole of the pitch and not miss bits in the corner.
Well, we've said before, haven't we, that if our league is going to be amortised at some point in the future, it's fine if you're not paying anything for something. You can't really complain about the coverage. If you are, it has to have a minimum standard.
And there's a representative from the match officials department this week down under looking at the NRL bunker, looking at how the NRL referees operate, how that department operates. So whether that's part of a plan with the Our League to maybe create a bunker system, I have no idea. By the way, I'm just putting two and two together to get 4, which I might not be right with. Because we talked before, didn't we, about trying to get a video referee at every game. There's already been a trial of that with the Our League game at Hull Salford. So, but that was where video referee was in the ground. So perhaps it is cheaper to do that with having a video referee in the ground. But if you could create a system whereby you could travel centrally to one point, there was discussion, I believe, at one stage last season where we may have been having to travel down to. I think it was somewhere in Oxfordshire. It might be in Skye's sort of
High Wycombe.
It might be in High Wycombe, yeah. And that would have been a sort of central base, particularly when Toronto were in the competition. Instead of sending video referees, were being sent to Toronto. Instead of being sent to Toronto, you'd be sent to High Wycombe. Almost sounds like a punishment, doesn't it? Sent to
Not quite Coventry,
yeah. But sent to High Wycombe to video referee, and that worked a little bit like that in the World Cup. So when I was explaining to people at Leeds City Council why I wasn't working at Leeds City Council, living in the city centre of Manchester, video refereeing a game that was taking place in Newcastle, but I was travelling to London, that took some explaining. So for a number of the games of the World Cup, we travelled down on train down to Ealing Studios, and we were based in a room on our own, not even sat with the director. They were in another building in Ealing Studios, video refereeing remotely. So that may be the way they're looking at it.
John Keir was very good on co-commentary because he wasn't having to speak along with someone else and someone else. He just had someone else next to him. So it was interesting listening to a coach who's had lots of coaching experience explain why things were happening on the pitch. Again, going back to the theory that you just need one commentator and one expert next to him. You don't need a whole gaggle of voices. And then the best thing about Sunday's coverage, because I'm watching it on mute, was watching the Women's Cup game, of course, because I would. And the first thing you see is the commentator wearing a Power Gen Challenge Cup jacket, which I thought was wonderful branding. Good old Power Gen.
Power Gen, that's going back, what, 2006?
Was that the last time?
2005?
Last time media were given free coats.
Yeah, that is true, actually. Yeah.
I mean, I'll be wearing my Betfred Super League coat on Saturday because it's the only one I've got. I can't wear a Wakefield coat to go and sit in a press box, but I can wear one of a company who doesn't pay me, so that's all right. Where are the free coats? We didn't get anything. Where's our free stuff?
You've got a Tunnocks caramel wafer.
Got a Tunnocks caramel wafer. Sports Day started.
Has it?
Can't see the Liam Herring's criticism from here, can you?
Oh, they're showing the Challenge Cup. There's some people.
Is that previewing it? Or
yeah.
Is it
coming up at 5 to 7? The Challenge Cup draw. Before that, Cristiano Ronaldo's farted.
I saw a tweet today about Batley. It was to this day in, 1897?
First Challenge Cup.
They beat St Helens in the first Challenge Cup. So
Batley, Headingley.
Yeah, and Batley have won the Challenge Cup 3 times, I believe, but never having been to Wembley. So from going back to the 1895 Cup, you'd imagine that would be high on their list.
I think they've targeted that.
Yeah.
They played very well against Keith. I watched that and enjoyed that. Thought they were really good.
There was a theory there that perhaps Halifax and Bradford was the same kind of thing. Halifax may have been more unwinning on Saturday than a couple of weeks ago.
I think, again, if you're Bradford and you could have got your team to Wembley.
Jodie Cunningham's on telly. You can't see it because my phone's there. And, she's there. And the Challenge Cup's there, the men's one. Obviously.
Is she doing the draw?
Well,
do we know how her ankle is?
I know I've asked and my sources haven't got back to me. So I don't know. She's probably saying the BBC now, but, England women's captain. Well, she's the captain, so... I can't turn the sound up, so you have to...
So are you going to relay the draw as it happens?
And he says, how many free Tissot watches has James got? Sure you didn't get any watches.
I didn't get any.
Players. No,
didn't get any.
Players.
Yeah, the players got them, didn't they, for Man of the Match? And I think that was before... I had a Tissot shirt as an official, but I didn't... I had to pay for the privilege of that.
This is one thing I've noticed from going through old programmes is that players who won the Man of the Match used to get 25 quid and a silver salver or whatever. What do they actually get these days? Nothing.
What about when Silk Cut sponsored the Challenge Cup? They used to get a packet of cigarettes, didn't they?
The press box used to get like 200. And very few people, it's like some were walking away with 600 fags.
So you could sell them on your local shop. Yeah. The Rugby League media there.
Yeah.
They're showing highlights of like people scoring tries. There's someone from Huddersfield. scoring against Leeds. Salford are now scoring a try. Obviously, Wakefield won't be on there scoring a try, but even though
you got one
try at the weekend.
even though we've played another game and London Scholars didn't this week, we still haven't caught them up in terms of points. We're still behind them.
And they won the second half, 6-4.
So they got Nigel Wakefield would have brought him in.
I wouldn't go much on that because
the cues may have been not just on the rack; they may have sent them back to the shops. Wakefield scored 53 points now to London Scholars 66. So this is the big rivalry of 2023.
I mean, clearly performance of the day in Super League was Hull, but that doesn't half make it even more difficult for Wakefield.
Yeah, they're showing Halifax now winning at Wembley.
Really?
Yeah.
1987.
Yeah. And now they're showing them score tries against Bradford on the weekend. I realise this is me telling you what's going on at the... no, they actually look good. They found the best try. Cut away with a fan. There you go. So
that was a disappointing result for Huddersfield.
Yeah, I think that, again, whilst...
What are Huddersfield?
Everybody quite rightly said, what a great turnaround, having lost 7 games for Hull, and crowd were fantastic and got them home. Nobody really said, actually, that's really quite a poor result for Huddersfield.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, particularly with Hull and the record that they've got at the moment. What was it, 7 losses on the bounce? And the record at home as well. 40-0 against Hull KR, and they got hammered against
60 by Salford.
Yeah, so... I think a really poor result. I was listening to a little bit of the commentary on Radio Leeds, and was it Ollie Russell, I think, was on there, and he sort of admitted that the performance just wasn't good enough.
Did he say they would have been better if they had a scrum half in who could kick the ball? A bit like Oliver Russell, who's injured at the moment.
Well, I think for the size of the squad that they've got, and the money that they must be spending, then that is a disappointing result for Huddersfield.
They're just on the Batley fella scoring a try in the corner while getting his foot squashed in slow motion, so that was good. What are Huddersfield? What are they? They were 2 years ago rebuilding.
Yep.
Under Ian Watson. Last year they had been rebuilt. Got to the Champions Cup final.
But
Craig Lingard's on the telly.
Craig Lingard.
He's not wearing a daft hat.
Does he say columnist of 4020?
I don't think it's going to do that. No, they should have got you up in the background, shouldn't they?
They're obviously...
I think they're actually just going to do the draw now.
Full bag and mashings, isn't it?
They're actually getting on with doing the draw straight away. They're not faffing around.
Putting balls in a bag. Yeah. Here we go.
Where's Dave Woods?
No breaking news.
Dave Woods has been sacked. Well, he's not been sacked.
Don't say that. Don't say that at a time when the BBC are going through all their cuts.
He's been replaced as the draw meister. Right, so here's the draw from the Challenger. I mean, you can watch this yourself, and this is going to be great on the podcast.
It's going to be great on the podcast when you already know.
Is this your pitch to host a future draw?
Well, I did
Go
it.
on, then.
During lockdown, when they did that redraw, I did it as a video, and I didn't get a job off that. Number three's out first. Who's that? They haven't put a graphic on the telly, so I can't tell you. Who's number 3? Oh, he's going well, this. Number 3's playing number 14. Best numbers.
Did you not do the dress rehearsal?
Typical BBC, they haven't put the numbers on the screen. It's not even in the paper either. Right, 3's playing 14. 2 is playing...
You've got your wish, Phil. You know you said you didn't want the names announced.
2's playing 6. Johnny Cunningham's already a step up on the people who can't separate a 6 and a 9, so that's good. Well, she's played both.
Hull FC have been drawn to face Castleford away.
Oh, that's a bit of a boring game, isn't it? 16.
So Hull are away.
Halifax versus St Helens.
Oh, that's good.
Hull KR versus Batley.
So you're ahead of me, bloody...
Catalan versus Warrington.
Oh, well, they've not even drawn that out yet. You've got 4 games, I've only got 3. Oh, I should give up on that.
I don't know if somebody's guessing.
4.
York versus London.
Oh, that's a bit...
World Championship.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be Leeds Wakefield. 11.
I don't know.
It's just numbers, isn't it? It's actual numbers. I'm actually applying to be Alan Dedicote's voice of the balls on the lottery. Remember when people used to play the lottery?
Leeds v Wigan.
Oh, it's a fix.
Wakefield v Lee.
No, can't be bothered going.
I think Leeds v Wigan will be on telly.
7-1. I'm just reading out numbers. I don't even know where we are. Oh, 1 Batley Bulldogs because they've just cut to Craig Lingard.
Salford Huddersfield.
Oh, that's boring, isn't it? Well, I mean, it's not boring, but it's just in terms of a cup draw, you want something a little bit different. Who've Batley drawn? They've not actually, I mean, it's good because they've got...
Hull KR Batley.
Oh. It's alright, isn't it? But then it doesn't matter what happens now because they're in the 1895 semi-finals anyway. It would have helped if they'd put
Halifax versus St Helens, did I say? Halifax St Helens.
No, it would have helped if they'd put the graphic on the screen showing you who's drawn who, because obviously I've got it on mute, but... At least they've got it on. At least they've come on at 6:30. They've done a bit of preamble. They haven't done a load of boring interviews with people who won the cup in 1833. Just got on with it.
So Castle and Warrington.
Yeah,
interesting because they
fixture,
played each other a couple of weeks ago over Easter. Castleford versus Hull, so we get the wish that Hull aren't at home. But again, interesting fixture. The Lee Radford derby.
Yeah.
York London.
And the last derby now.
York London is really interesting because they are almost guaranteed a Super League team, the winner of that in the next round.
Yeah.
Halifax St Helens, which again is exactly the tie that that Halifax would have wanted.
Yeah.
And that is similar to, was it Whitehaven St Helens last year, where they had a great day out. Hull KR Batley, which again is exactly what Batley would want. I think they'll fancy that. Wakefield Lee.
Yeah.
A chance for Wakefield to get revenge for last week's disastrous home game.
Well, that's why very much a Friday night game. You just get out of the way and don't have on the telly.
Leeds Wigan, which is clearly going to be the televised game on the BBC. Salford Huddersfield.
And that's it.
Which again is quite interesting because both of those. Cattle and Warrington.
Oh, Cattle and Warrington, yeah.
Craig Lingard, what's your response? Oh, it's great.
Interesting to see whether they take the Catalan fixture. It's in Catalan, isn't it? From the BBC's point of view, logistically.
They've done it before,
trickier,
but it depends whether I guess they can get a partnership with BN or somebody like that to actually film it and then send it back.
I've seen worse draws.
I think there's some good great games there.
I mean, the good news is I've not put me typical five each way on Wakefield to get to Wembley because obviously it's not going to happen. So.
And is that round out the weekend of the 19th of May?
Yeah. So
that's good. And how? I can't remember how it works. Is it 2 on Viaplay and 2 on?
I don't know.
BBC? No.
Some games will be on telly.
There will be some games played on some dates on the telly.
Yeah. And some teams will get knocked out and some teams will go through. And then we've got the 1895 draw to look forward to. I'm curious to know if this is the first time St Helens have faced Halifax since losing against them in the 1987 final, which I was at, says Paul. We'd have to, obviously in the cup, not in...
Well, it can't be. Oh, in the cup, you mean?
I'm assuming so.
Because they played in
the Super League.
Yes.
Maybe it's when they were Halifax, not
Blue Sox.
Yeah. But they would have played as Halifax.
But actually, that's a really good draw.
Yeah. That's all right. Yeah. I mean, Leeds Wigan. Everyone likes Leeds Wigan.
Well, it brings back some great Challenge Cup memories. The Martin Affias try at Wembley will be endlessly shown.
Get Francis Cummins back on the telly again.
1999, when Leeds won, they beat Wigan at Headingley. And I think that was a game where... Was it Adrian Morley got sent off early on? Or Barry McDermott might have been got sent off early on. And
friend of the podcast. Back to Huddersfield then.
Sorry.
So Huddersfield.
How exciting.
Well, I'm expecting the draw to be on late and not just get it over and done with, which is good. That's what all draws should be like. Huddersfield, 2 years ago, I'm looking at the league table to know what happened 2 years ago. They were rebuilding under Ian Watson. Last year they had rebuilt and they got to at Spurs and they got to the playoffs. This year they're back down near the bottom end of the table. I mean, granted, they're 8 points above Wakefield, but 4 wins from 9, and they have still got that game in hand against St Helens, and now resurgent, of course, having won a game in a row. But what?
They'd point to the narrow losses that they've had, which could quite easily have. They probably could have quite easily won another 2 or 3 of those games. In fairness to them, and they've had some injuries to some of their key players.
But they've also had enough key. I mean, one of the things they made a big point of, which is quite right, is that they've got a better squad and a bigger squad than they've ever had before. So injuries you can't really use as an excuse. They've almost had an overabundance of luxuries, and is that part of the problem, that the forwards sort of tend to take care of themselves, but the backs still don't have that cutting edge that they were looking for?
I think he's still chopping and changing with what he thinks probably is his best pairings, given that perhaps his first choice may not be available to him, and that probably doesn't help.
Certainly, Theo Farge being out hasn't been great, but I think they've been disappointed. And at some point, you do have to turn those narrow losses into wins if you're going to be right up there winning a competition.
And I think we talked last week about Castleford and the way in which they play and Classic Cast and stuff like that. And Ian Watson has this the process philosophy, and it's a fairly conservative way in which they play. But at some point, you wonder whether they have to sort of throw the shackles off a little bit.
Yeah, if you're going into a game,
particularly when you've got players like Jake Connor,
yeah,
Will Price, that are
here.
Yeah, that they're creative players that I think to put them in shackles is you're probably not going to get the best out of them.
And the thing about close games is that's where you need your X factor players, because they are going to be the difference. So if it's 20-14 at Hull and you've only got 30 seconds to go, you don't want to be playing process. You don't want to be giving. I mean, I'd listen to the end of the game because it obviously was quite a close finish, and because you can't see it, you have to rely on the fact that it's a visualisation you're getting from somebody else. But on that last tackle, when the Hooters go in and Huddersfield are in possession and the ball is surrendered quite cheaply, you just think that's where you need your X factor players.
Although having said that, wasn't it Jake Connor that kicked the ball into touch the other week?
Yes.
I Huddersfield won. They were
trailing by Leeds by a point.
By a point.
Yeah. Which again, inexcusable in many ways. That if you're going to be a key player that's going to take a team to a trophy, you've got to know what the score is at any given point in a game. That to me is, especially when you've missed the conversion that would have actually put you a point ahead as well. But that is not to put all the blame on Jake Collins.
No.
It's just finding a way of playing that allows them. When you'll know obviously better than I will, the Challenge Cup final last year, Huddersfield were near enough throughout that entire game to have won it. And yet what they didn't have was somebody who could change it in an instant, because you only needed 1 minute when you did that. And yet Wigan had a Harry Smith that conjured something out of nothing and won the game. Yeah,
I suppose. Yeah, they've got X factor. Not that Huddersfield don't. With the Bevan Frenches and the likes. I don't know. I think it's, as I said, because they play in such a structured way. Are they allowed to express, as Scully would say, express themselves?
Vision and awareness.
Yeah, vision and awareness. There's got to be a balance, hasn't there, between the two? That if an opportunity presents itself, you've got to give the power to the player to play that if he wants to play it. But it's got to be it's got to be within a defined structure, I guess. But that's fine as long as you're winning. But if you're not winning, then you got to change things up a little bit, I suppose. But talking of missed conversions, Catalan a missed conversion in the last kick of the game, wasn't it?
Post, yeah,
and that would have taken it to golden point, wouldn't it?
And Adam Kieran's been playing, been kicking pretty well. I think we can't gloss over the fact that is a massive result for Hull.
And it seems to have
huge turnaround in fortune.
You'd like to say it's come from absolutely nowhere, hasn't it? Because they haven't really shown signs of.
No, and I think I'm pleased for obviously Tony Smith and his staff, because at no point have they panicked. There's only ever been honesty in the press conference about where they were and what they were trying to achieve, and but they never lost the belief. The one thing about Tony is he has a vision and he sells it to the players, and it doesn't always work straight away, but when it does, it's a real reward for the way he. You talk about Huddersfield perhaps being the archetypal team of process. Tony is the archetypal guy of, I want to play my way out of trouble. It would have been very easy for him over the last 6 or 7 weeks to become more and more conservative, 5 drives and a kick. He doesn't play that way, and he can't play that way, and he can't coach that way, and the players that he's now got under his charge need to learn how to play that way. He's taken over from Brett Hodgson, who is another in that process school. So there always was going to be a time of adaptation, but it was really going quite horribly wrong for them, and to turn that around. And he said, quite rightly, paid due credit to the fans that 11,500 were there, stuck by them, really got behind them, close game, carried them over the line. It's an amazing turnaround in a very short space of time that deserves a huge amount of credit.
And the next game is against Wakefield, if I'm right.
Oh, it's the big game next Thursday.
But suddenly, with one win, how that table changes, because I think they're third from bottom now, aren't they? Huddersfield are second from Castleford, second from bottom. Hull are now third from bottom. If they go and beat Wakefield, then there's suddenly that 6-point gap between them and Wakefield, and it's quite a cushion at this stage of the season. So people sort of are very quick to press the panic button, aren't they? That's what I was suggesting, that people need to be patient. It can soon change off the space of 1-2 results.
But you need that first result, and at the moment, I don't know where that's going to come from Wakefield.
Well, we're not quite saying Hull are back yet, just in case, because that's the great rugby league thing. X team is back now; they've won a game in a row.
Yeah,
So we'll see what happens with Hull. But of course, it does mean now that we can say, well, Tony Smith was completely 100% justified in getting rid of Jake Connor because they beat them. They beat the team with Jake Connor in. So Tony Smith is a coaching genius.
The great thing as well is the player of the match was Davy Litton, who played very well the week before. And the one thing that Tony has a track record of is developing young players, and it's great to see guys who perhaps we haven't yet heard of or haven't yet reached their peak being given an opportunity and being the most influential player on the field. That's a real stamp of Tony Smith's teams.
Tony Smith's a genius. We're geniuses as well, because as Ian has pointed out, we've seen Halifax play St Helens in the Challenge Cup because they made the semi-final a couple of years ago at Bolton.
Yeah, we were there.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So was I.
Was that?
I checked to see who the referee, but it was
I wasn't. I think it was on the side.
That was
a video referee for it. I think
that was when Halifax inadvertently beat Bradford when Bradford.
When Bradford were back.
Yeah.
You remember that one? Yeah, you remember that. So yes. So thank you to all the people who comment during the week. Martin sends loads of comments in. I do read all the comments. I don't reply to them, but I do read them all. So thank you very much for your continued support of this programme.
This podcast, which is hugely popular in Mexico.
I mean, it just shows you how...
Have you got relatives in Mexico?
If I did, I don't think they'd listen.
But, I mean, it must be so easy to become the number one podcast for rugby in Mexico, because we didn't do a podcast and we're still number 2. So
is that rugby or is that rugby league?
It's rugby.
Rugby,
right? Yeah. Wow. Sometimes we're better than Brian.
Are we going on tour?
We could do a library tour in Mexico.
The Aztec Rugby League tour.
I mean, are we just making that up like a made-up rugby league competition? Just making it up. I'm going to buy West Wales because if I say I'm going to buy Hunslet, then people from Hunslet will get upset, or Swinton. So I'm going to buy West Wales, buy their share in the RFL. Then I'm going to subvert the RFL and build my own competition and put all these teams, because I've obviously got
the franchise.
I've got Pyongyang, haven't I? I've got Bucharest away and rented last week. Now I've bought West Wales. I'll buy someone else.
Mexico City,
Mexicans, just call them that. And then we're going to play each other.
Magic weekend in Mexico.
In the middle of in
Guadalajara.
I'm going to play all these games that don't exist between teams I own. And then I'm going to win the championship. So that's a great idea.
You can, with Dave Whelan in 1998, present yourself the trophy.
But how ridiculous is that? West Wales had a vote on the Rugby League Council, even though the club doesn't
That's
exist.
why I'm buying them.
Yeah.
And Catalan and Toulouse don't, because they don't have a seat at the council. It's absolute. But the Welsh West Wales. So is that foreign?
Yeah. They should come
the
under the Welsh Rugby League.
The RFL governs England, doesn't it?
Yeah, in the same way that the French... No, don't.
I hadn't thought of that.
There's a Wales Rugby Union, Scottish Rugby Union, what am I on about? Wales Rugby League.
Yeah.
Scotland Rugby League, Ireland Rugby League. So, bizarre.
And no one thought that before now. I would have been
Stop
funny.
it.
What happened to the vote for Ottawa races?
Well, that's
now Cornwall.
Oh, Cornwall,
yeah.
How did I forget that?
Well,
it went from Hemel to Ottawa to Cornwall. It's not the most obvious route, is it?
Did Ottawa sell any shirts?
No, don't.
Did Ottawa sell any shirts? I know New York obviously have, because that was the inspiration.
We need a Mexico shirt.
Mexico City Mexicans. I know at least one Halifax-based person who works at St Helens who's happy with the draw.
Well, yes.
But still not answers the question.
Best of both worlds.
So that was Halifax and the Challenge Cup. And there's something else I was going to mention, which I can't remember now, so it can't have been important. But let's talk about St Helens, because they are back. Warrington, of course, they're now rubbish. You know, Darryl Powell, he wasn't the curse of the first Coach of the Month award. He was the curse of the second successive Coach of the Month award, because now they've lost 2 in a row now. So they might as well be Wakefield. But St Helens beat them 28-6. Conrad Hummel scored a try.
Interception.
So, St Helens are back.
They are.
And Warrington are.
I was incredibly impressed with St Helens because you can use injuries and you can use suspensions, but they were missing 10 players who you would say, they're first choice selections. They were coming off again an indifferent run. When was last time Saints lost 2 consecutive games? You probably can say last year when they played half a team. But people were questioning. Even some people were ridiculously questioning whether Paul Wellens was the coach for the job, which was nonsense. But to play the way they did with the young side they had out, I thought a guy who didn't get a lot of mention on the telly but was absolutely fantastic was Sam Royal. He was absolutely brilliant in the second row. And they've got people like Matautia and Sirin in the second row who are real hard workers that are there to mop up behind everything. You know, Royal stepped into that role. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. George Delaney got in the team of the week. You know, was a teenage prop, fantastic.
And what about the confidence of, was it Benison who threw the most outrageous?
Well, I was going to ask you about that.
What about confidence to do that? You know, I thought they were great. They looked almost back to the Saints that we've known for the last sort of 4 years. Albeit, as you said, there were a number of players out, but. Yeah, it was a good game.
If I was the rest of the competition, I would be worried that they could come up with a performance like that when they're in a slight dip in form. When you look at that talent, if that's got to come in again at any time during the season, it's not going to derail them.
Well, the reality is, with a competition that is designed around a playoff system, providing you're in the playoffs, you're in the chance of winning it. Well, we've not had a team that's won it from 6th ever, but team from 5th.
Nearly.
Yeah, team from 5th. But yeah, Leeds got to the final last year, didn't they? So, you just need to be in the playoffs, and you need to hit that run of form really towards the back end of the year, which is what you saw with Leeds last year.
But I just thought Saints now that they have got a group of young players who will be able to step in either by choice if the coach wants to rest some of his senior guys, or if they have to use them because of injury. And some of them are top quality already. I think you're right. Matt Duff did look like he'd gone out for a hot dog. It was a fantastic image of him stood there going, "Where did he go?"
I think he must have sold everybody though. It was just.
I thought it was brilliant, and it was done at such pace as well.
Yeah.
And the spatial awareness to be able to stay in field when you're doing that. Absolutely set. But then we forget he scored a try in the grand final last year. So
No, I mean, it just shows that the production line that they've got at St Helens is strong, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it has been for a long, long time. So.
And it's a reset for Warrington because, as we said, it was always going to be when they lost their first game. Yeah. How would they cope with that? Well, they've lost their first game, and on the back of that, they've now lost their second game. And I think even Darryl was saying that the margin of defeat against Wigan didn't disguise the fact that Wigan were clearly the better team on the day. So, he'll say, right, all right, we won 8. We've re-established ourselves as a playoff contenders. I still think from what we've seen already this season, they know they'll be in the playoffs at the end of the year. They now know what they've got to do to beat the top teams when they get in the playoffs. He'll be taking this international break and thinking, great, we can start again. We can do some hard work during maybe the first week. We can ease them back in for when the competition starts again, but we now have a template of what we need to be in our next 10 matches, and when we play St Helens again or Wigan again or whoever it might be, Catalan at the top of the league, we know what we've got to do to beat them. That actually is probably a good thing for Warrington at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't go into it with that expectation to lose for that benefit, but you tend to learn more in defeat than you do in victory, don't you? So, as he said last week, it was unlikely they were going to go through the entire season unbeaten, and that's been proven. But it's how they respond the next time they get a St Helens or a Wigan, isn't it?
It was a great game. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
There was a Wakefield fan I saw on the social media today who said they wanted to draw a championship team in the cup to see where we stood for next season, which
harsh,
a bit harsh. But Wakefield lost to Wigan yesterday, 22-6 in a game which I've seen very much described as a game of rugby league that existed, and Wigan won. And having Wakefield lost, was it 16-0 or whatever it was, 3 weeks ago. There they go, and it was just a game that happened.
Well, Wigan went top of the league, which again, shouldn't be dismissed lightly because
12,000 people watched a game which everyone knew what the result was going in.
Well, and I think Wigan have just come off playing St Helens, Warrington. There was always going to be a little bit of a backlash to that. They did enough in the first half, I think, probably in the knowledge that Wakefield are now cheering when they score a try. So to be 18-0 down,
we'll play for the middle eights. The middle eights don't exist.
They've probably, Wigan knew that they would have won, and it's an attitude thing, isn't it? If you're playing in a game and at half time, you've technically already got the 2 points on the board. How do you approach the second half if you're knackered from the 3 weeks before? So Wigan more than competent to get that win. Wakefield, have they got something to build on because they scored a try and they didn't lose as heavily? We'll know when they play Hull next week because that's the big one, isn't it?
Another team of which got many internationals in this week, so that's okay. Andy says Wire don't get a week off because Sean Wayne has picked half the Wire team in the England squad. Is this a conspiracy, Andy? Are you saying this is a Wigan-based anti-Warrington conspiracy by Sean Wayne? Because if you are, that's a big allegation to make. What is concerning is, not concerning. He's all the love for James on the chat. I mean, this is complete 180 from obviously when you're on the pitch, boo, boo, and everyone's like, oh, it's great.
It always happens when you finish. People like you. When you're active, no one likes you. It's always the way. Yeah, it won't last long anyway. It never does it?
Give it a few.
Yeah,
milk it while you
can. Do we need to say anything about Salford versus Candlers? Otherwise, other than it's another great result for
I
Salford.
listened to it on the radio. So it sounded enjoyable. I think Paul Rowley's comments afterwards were absolutely right that, with the resource and the injuries that they've got and the squad depth, which is really limited like Wakefield is, to be where they are is a testament to them, and to be able to grind out wins when they have to, fantastic. Yes, they're renowned for playing flamboyant, free-scoring rugby, but to grind out a 16-14 win against a team that have started the season pretty well, I think they'd be delighted with that. I think it's a great result for Salford.
Yeah, I mean, I know when Ian Watson was there were sort of signs up on the dressing room wall and things like that was almost sort of, they almost revelled in their position of being a club that didn't have much money, and almost we were using that to their advantage. So, okay, we don't have that much money as a club, but what do we have? Well, we have team spirit, we have standards, we have work ethic, etc., etc. And it's playing to all those things, isn't it? You don't necessarily need to spend the money. Look at Warrington and what happened last year. Look at Huddersfield and the money that they spend there.
Absolutely.
Just because you've got money, just because you've got resources, doesn't necessarily replicate it on the field. So for me, it's a sign of what's going well behind the scenes, I think, and what Paul Rowley's doing and the rest of the team or the staff are doing with the team.
And it sounded from the commentary, and again, you can only go on the impression that you're given, that first half they spurned a lot of scoring opportunities, should have been further ahead. Second half there were maybe 3 or 4 sets of 6 on their own line that they defended, and that just tells you everything you need to know about the team. So no, I think that is a great result for Salford. I don't think it does Catalan too much damage, because I think Steve McNamara wouldn't have publicly admitted it, but I'm not sure he thought his team would go 7 matches undefeated at the start of the season, bearing in mind he's been severely down on his top line troops. I think he will accept that they are where they are. They could have drawn that game, could have gone into Golden Point, they may even have won it. But I think the other thing about Salford is a story that sort of emerged today.
Well, are we all going to go and buy shares now? £100?
It's now going to be a supporter-owned shareholding, which I think... Is there an alarm bell there that we're talking about a club in Super League that clearly doesn't have the financial backing that it needs and is opening up shares to supporters? On the one hand, you're thinking that's great because it's democratic and fans will have a say in the running of the club. On the other hand, are we saying that's a little bit scary, that a club that is in the elite level can't fund itself?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see how
IMG
reflect that in their scoring of the financial stability of a club.
And what are you buying shares in? Because again, until they get this ground issue sorted out, even as firm tenants in somebody else's ground,
it's just the name, isn't it?
There's no asset, is there, to invest in?
And it'll be a club that was established a number of years ago under a certain company name with a certain year, as they always are.
Dr. Kukash Holdings.
Are they ever worth really anything? Because when they go belly up, they just reform and under a different name. So. Yeah, I don't know. I mean
clearly they're surviving on the handout from Sky, which they're using to build their squad, which again is testament to the fact that the players that they're signing are not elite in terms of their value. There's some real elite players. Brodie Croft would probably get into any Super League team. How he's signed an 8-year deal and how that's structured, I have no idea. But they're fishing for the bulk of their recruits in a lower market, And you wonder how this announcement that it's now going to be spectator owned, if enough people come forward to buy shares, how do you make a decision in that? You've got 7,000 shareholders. We've seen the Rugby League councils unwieldy.
Well, you appoint a board, don't you? You appoint a board,
again,
and the board makes decisions. But yeah, it's not a good look for the sport, is it?
Daniel said, fan-owned sounds great, but doesn't work great in football. At professional level, it's got to be a worry. Where would the money actually go? I mean, it's like when I spent £25 on shares in Wakefield Trinity when we were in belly up. Just throw some money in a bin. It's not a financial proposition. It's preying on supporters and their emotions, and
but we had this similar conversation a few weeks ago around how we're sort of saying, well, how many Adam Pearsons are there? How many? What's the plan when Ken Davey is no longer at Huddersfield? Is there a plan? The clubs that have a single backer are fragile businesses, because if that person withdraws for whatever reason, is no longer there, then what's the backup plan?
But clubs who have no backer are even more vulnerable.
Well, arguably not if you've got a stable. If you've got a stable of fans that have all got a share, but it doesn't move your club forward very far. But how does a club that doesn't own a ground,
whose average fan home attendance is around about 5,000, which is no criticism.
I don't know what the structure will be in terms of their lease and the stadium in terms of their revenue income generation. In terms of what are they getting a percentage of the income?
Well, at the moment you've got to pay for
the beer and the food,
haven't you?
And but who's paying that? Where's that money going to? So right, this is what I mean. So if you're looking at all your revenue income streams, they're all suddenly reduced simply as we said the other week about the Speedway at Wolverhampton. If you don't own your ground, you're severely limited. Compare that to St Helens, Warrington, that own the ground, diversify their income with banqueting on non-match day events, etc. NHS that occupy part of the Warrington Stadium. The more you can diversify your incomes, then the stronger your club will be.
I know this goes back to phrases like due diligence and stuff, and I know there's a desperate need to fill all the internet with every single rugby league story that's going out there, but it does show you that when everyone was jumping up and down getting excited about a potential investor in Salford, that they should have waited until further down the line, because obviously that was a story that's gone absolutely nowhere now. Daniel is back. I was involved in Russian and Diamonds when we became fan trust owned, and it becomes very messy and complicated and doesn't work. That's the problem with supporters, is they don't always necessarily know how a business needs to run.
I think Hunslet, if they were on here, a representative would say it hasn't gone the way they wanted it to go, and they've had to get professional people in at board level, because just a spectator run an owned club is really difficult to manage. It's
Well, John Lewis is owned by the people, isn't it? But
they're talking about withdrawing from that.
They are, but you get professionals in to run it. You don't get someone that just enjoys shopping at John Lewis to run it.
Tim's asked what happens with when teams get relegated in the IMG version of Rugby League. Will their contracts be null and void? Well, I assume it's the same as just happens now. And everyone cares about the players losing their jobs, and no one cares about the backroom stuff and the people who keep clubs running. In the Challenge Cup, Batley beat
You didn't mention Leeds and Leeds.
Oh, I did mention Castlewood and Hull. Yeah, rather. Lee, who, throwing things back to in the days when Top Loader was a video recorder, and the days when they were at the top end of the...
it was a washing machine.
Well, you used to get top loading video recorders as well.
I have to say,
Betamax. You enjoy them,
they were
you
excellent.
Them.
They were
How
really,
many times did they
really
do Dancing in the Moonlight? Twice.
Once before the game and once at half time. But they did a couple of cover songs as well. One of Bruce Springsteen's. They were very, very good.
Glory days.
What was the atmosphere like?
It was all right. It was enjoyable.
What was the crowd?
6,500.
Right.
And at the moment, the feel-good factor is definitely around that club. The start that they made was fantastic. They were 16-0 up playing, really entertaining rugby. They were powerful up front, and they had invention behind the pack. Lachlan Lamb was great. And they came up against a team that, on that night, were not going to score more than 16 points. Leeds, as Rowan Smith said, they were going lateral too early, and they were chasing the clock too early. You felt... What I thought was really interesting was that Lee didn't make their first substitution until 45 minutes. which is really unusual, and you could visibly see that their pack that had been so dominant in that early 20 minutes, and Leeds just couldn't handle them, they were starting to tire and making some mistakes, and you thought, well, when's Adrian Lamb going to make a change? And had Leeds scored and made it 16-12, it may have been a different game. What got lost in all of that was that Leeds scored the bulk of all their tries, the bulk of their points in the first half. The defence in the second half was fantastic. They didn't concede a point in the second half. So, 5 wins. Both teams have now played 5 wins, 5 defeats. It's a fair reflection of where they are. Leeds particularly inconsistent. But Lee, I don't think anybody at this stage had them down for 5 wins.
Yeah, but they beat Watson Helens.
Yeah.
They've beaten Leeds.
And they beat...
they've beaten Hull away.
They are. I think we said last week they're safe. They are definitely safe.
Who else did they beat them?
Wakefield away.
It's irrelevant. Oh, it's a kiwi.
Who hasn't?
Well, exactly.
Yes, sorry.
You mentioned subsidies. Interesting, Saints only used 2 on Friday, which is bizarre. As Andy points out, Dancing in the Moonlight also a cover. So just no original.
Yes, it's true.
No original.
It's true.
Hull KR beat Cass.
But they were very good.
Well, there you go.
I didn't see Hull KR Cass because I was at Lee. I was told that it was raining quite heavily and was quite a dour game.
But at least you could tell the teams apart.
Well, first of all, Hull KR was at 5 wins on the trot.
Really
establishing themselves as a playoff credential.
It wasn't their best performance, but by any stretch for Hull KR. I sort of had it on in the background. It didn't grab my eye often enough to comment too much in detail. But clearly they didn't play to their as well as they have done. But ultimately they got the win, didn't they?
Yeah.
Castleford, they've still got some improvement to do.
Well, I think Andy Laster said in the aftermath of that game that some players are now playing for their future. I think when a coach has to say that publicly, that that everything's not right. There is a danger for Cass that if Wakefield were to beat Hull, it looks like it's pulling Castleford into a battle that they really don't need at the moment.
I mean, just going back to Andy Lans's comment, I don't think that's a shock, is it?
No.
Isn't Castleford the oldest average age anyway?
Yeah, a lot of players out of contract at the end of the season.
So you're almost saying what everybody else knows in any event, and most of the players would know that. So it's not a huge revelation, to be honest. But he's now got his feet under the table, hasn't he? So he probably feels able to say.
But when a coach starts almost threatening their players, it's an indication that something isn't quite right.
Yeah.
League Express. I tell you what, next week I can't wait for their 4-page pullout of London Scholars versus Dewsbury Rams. Good job that game exists.
Because there's no women's rugby league next week, and there's no wheelchair.
Hey, what a week for Hull FC! Not only did they beat Huddersfield Giants in the men's Super League, but they also beat London Roosters in the wheelchair Super League. What a result that is!
Again, if we're looking at performances of the weekend, that is a fantastic 36-26 win by Hull over the Roosters. I think third in wheelchair Super League.
There's no table, so I can't tell you.
It was a great performance.
Well done, Hull. And obviously, I didn't realise they'd brought in Martin Royce from Wigan. He was on the telly and very good during the World Cup. So obviously that's a massive boost for them.
Big transfer in the world of wheelchair rugby league.
Tells you about there. You phoned up Adam Pearson's, hadn't you?
London had all their stars playing: Joe Coyd, Lewis King, Freya Levy. So that is a fantastic result.
Yeah, I do like when they say Tom Coyd was reappointed as England. He won the bloody World Cup. What are they going to do? Sack him? I mean, that'd be completely rugby league. Men's Challenge Cup. Batley beat Keighley. It was on the Sports, and you probably watched it. 14-4. Halifax beat Bradford. That was on the BBC, but as we said, you probably turned off. But Halifax were very good.
The York result was closer than I would have predicted. To be
22-18, and they were losing 12-4 at half time. It says here on Friday night.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they don't give attendances for the men's game, but do for the women's. But you can get more cachet from
I think Dewsbury led early on against London.
They did.
I think London obviously came back and took that.
Were they winning at half time?
No, they were 10-6 down at half time.
Yeah. I think that was it 16-10 at one stage to Dewsbury, and then London had a really good 30-minute period in the second half. Ollie Leyland, apparently the player.
What Steve Mascard said.
Well, that's if he says, he knows.
But not played at Wimbledon.
No,
the
Rosslyn Park.
Rosslyn Park.
Oh, the Roehampton, this one.
Oh, was that right? Oh, was it the women that were at Rosslyn Park?
Possibly. I don't know. In the Women's Challenge Cup, which also exists, which is in a group stage. If you're not aware, as it was last year.
Which is is that the template for the men's?
Well, the template for the men's, apparently, according to IMG, all going off subject, isn't that to play it over 2 legs?
Oh, I think
that's a terrible idea.
I think that one's gone.
Has it?
Yes.
Yeah.
When was that last done? The 1940s during the war.
Yeah.
Why would you play extra games? Anyway, sorry, I interrupted then.
So
no, that was instead of they were taking out the loop games to put in an extra Challenge Cup.
You've St Helens drew London Scholars in the first round over 2 legs.
But you could guarantee then that you'd have a home game, so you could include it in your season ticket because you're losing a loop fixture. But
I think
that one went on the back burner, as they say.
You can't replicate what's going on in Women's Rugby League in the men's game.
No, nor vice versa.
And here's a group stage, which is interesting because you get to see where teams in a different competition match up against teams in a higher one, such as Wigan's win against Cardiff on Sunday, which was 38-20. It says comfortable on the paper. I'm not sure it was comfortable necessarily, but it was an interesting game. You can tell Cardiff are a good team. You can tell they're not necessarily Rugby League at the front of their brain, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because obviously they're good players. They scored 20 points against Wigan, who are good, but you can tell there's something there. It was Cardiff. You would think would be very competitive in that second group in the Betfred Women's Super League brackets, not North, whatever it is. So it'd be interesting to see when they play Featherstone and Salford. Featherstone beating Salford, which you would have expected to happen. How they do in those 2 games. I don't know where Cardiff play Featherstone. If it's in Fev, I might go to that, but I don't know when it is and where. Likewise, London, who were beaten by St Helens 76-0, but St Helens are one of the best 3 teams in the competition, so they expect that to happen. But when London play against Castleford, who were beaten 72-0 by Warrington, that will give you an idea of where London are. Elsewhere, Leeds beat Bradford 72-0. That was a game that happened.
Amy Hardcastle.
She's got
2 tries against her old club.
Caitlin Beavis is injured. She's done a shoulder or something. Clavicle. Out 6 weeks. Pete Smith tweeted it, yeah.
So she's not going to be playing in the
England game now.
In the England game.
No, unless she's miraculously.
Fran Goldthorpe signed for North Queensland.
Yeah, and
women withdrawing from the England game as well now.
Yes.
She's faked an injury. She's not really injured.
Jodie Cunningham, the captain's withdrawn, isn't she?
We don't know. We don't know.
We don't know the extent.
Oh, okay.
I think you're right.
Georgia Royce is off to Newcastle, which is very interesting.
But she is playing for England.
Is she?
Yes, I think she has been. I think her and Holly May Dodd may well be allowed to play in an international,
right?
But Georgia hasn't been allowed to play.
Frank Goldthorpe's busy playing rugby union anyway.
Playing golf.
It's good. I was in work the other day, and someone said to me, "You'll know this," and I said, "Oh, I'll do it." Kevin Sinfield. Right, I've heard of him. Who did he take over from as Leeds' top scorer? And I thought, I'm not going to know this, but I didn't know it was Lewis Jones, so I was all right.
Who was 92 last week and was at the game?
Because I said
the week before.
I didn't realise he was a good cricketer and all these other things in his.
Who, Lewis Jones?
Yeah, but you can't do that in this area. But you can if you're a woman, because obviously Fran Goldthorpe is good.
Arthur is a good cricketer. One of the only few, in fact, he may be the only player to score a try and a century at Headingley and a try and a century at the Sydney Cricket Ground and get sent off at both of them.
As soon as you put more caveats in there, the more likely that is the only one. Unless, of course, listener.
Thank you, Harry Jepson.
You know different. If you know any other good multi-sports people, well, Freya Levy plays England Rugby League wheelchair, ice hockey and basketball.
But not at the same time.
No.
Although she probably could.
Yeah. Where was I? Leeds beat Bradford. Huddersfield beat Alton, which I think that's an interesting result because I wasn't sure. I thought that might be closer because obviously how Huddersfield lost to Leeds in the Super League the week before, but obviously it shows you where they are and improving and so on and so forth. Lee beat Hull KR 38-16. Good result for Lee at the start of their rebranding period thing. Who else won? York beat Barrow 44-4. And I mentioned Warrington, so well done York Valkyrie, who are now of course without Holly May Dodd, who's off to Canberra. It's very exciting, and as I said last week, not necessarily the money, but the profile of the NRLW is really going to be the big battleground there, as it is in the NRL for everything that is not rugby union in the Southern Hemisphere, because now you can say, well, I don't want to play for the Wallabies, they're crap, I want to play for South Sydney, or if I'm from Fiji or Papua New Guinea or Samoa or Tonga or whatever, I want to play in this competition. We still won't get on our telly because it'll be talking about, rugby union all the time. And he's excited because Jodie Cunningham, of course, is one of their own because she's from Warrington.
Yeah.
Is that it? Have we missed out anything? I don't think so. Enjoy.
I know it's time for a Tunnocks caramel wafer. Please get in touch and sponsor us.
We won't be here on Monday.
No, it's bank holiday.
Because for the next two bank holidays, I'm starting to work.
And it's bank holiday the week after.
Yeah. So
we might do
we'll do something on the way back from Warrington.
Yes. Could do something in the car.
Yeah, because that's always good. And stick all the interviews with all the people that we. I thought Zoe Hornby's injured as well, did you?
Yes.
Yeah, so she won't be in the squad either. Trying to work out who's going to play for England.
But again, I think that makes the game against the French more competitive, which I'm all for.
Oh, exciting.
Go to Warrington if you can.
Go to Warrington. Go to Warrington. Doesn't matter who plays for England. They're still English.
And it's £20 for 2 internationals.
George Formby won the Grand National in the Isle of Man TT, says Andy. That George Formby.
While he was cleaning windows?
Yeah. No, that's what's his name. Robin Asquith. The less said about him, the better. James, thank you. Phil, thank you.
Enjoy your holiday.
Thank you.
We'll be back recording next week. But thank you for watching and listening and all those other things you do. It's much appreciated.